Hello, grade 10. How are you today? We will be starting a new unit. It's Unit 5, and this is Chapter 1 in Unit 5. It's about differences in economic development. Now, please, I would like you to think of a list of countries that you guys think are the least developed in the world. Now, I'm not going to explain what least developed countries mean. I would like you to think of it and write your own definition. This should not take you more than 3 minutes. Okay? And in case you do not know what that term means, you can use Google, please. Okay? All right, guys. Now, I would like you to pause the video for 2 minutes and think of your own definition of economic development. Okay, pause the video, write it down, and then put play and listen to the definition. So, economic development, it refers to more than economic growth. It refers not just to an increase in the productive capacity of a country, but to an increase in the economic welfare or well-being of the people of that country. In addition to the increase in output, it also includes improvements in the standards of education and also healthcare, investment in social and economic infrastructure, and wider social and economic choice. So, guys, what is economic development? It is the increase in the productive capacity of a country, but to an increase in the economic welfare or well-being of the people of that country. So it's not only about how much they are producing. It also takes into consideration the well-being of the people living in that country. And we would also want to make it better. How can we make the welfare or the well-being of people better in the country? It is by the increase of education, increase of healthcare, increase in investment in infrastructure, increase in what else? Incomes, finding job opportunities. So it is a wider range than only talking about economic growth. Please make sure you write this definition on your copybooks. Now, did you know that the least developed countries are a group of countries that have been classified by the UN as least developed in terms of low national income, gross national income, their weak human assets, and their high degree of economic vulnerability? According to the United Nations, least developed countries are more at risk than other nations of sliding deeper into poverty and remaining in a situation of underdevelopment. They are stuck in a vicious circle of poverty or cycle of poverty or a poverty trap. Now later on, you will understand what do we mean by vicious circle of poverty. More than 75% of the population of LDCs still live in poverty. So what are they telling us here? That mainly, if you are considered a least developed country, it is much easier for you to become less developed than becoming better. Now, this is regarding what you wrote before. Now, the least developed countries in the world would be Angola, Haiti, Laos, Cuba, and Vietnam. And definitely there is much more. So, we will explain and understand the causes and impacts of differences in economic development through income, productivity, population growth, the size of primary, secondary, and tertiary sector. If you remember this, we called it before industrial sectors. Regarding saving and investment, education, and healthcare. Stages of economic development. Now, I would like to explain what does the less developed economy, what does it mean? So this is the LDCs or countries. So first of all, they have a low level of human and economic development and diversification. Their industries are low, so they have low industrial development. They don't have the proper roads, bridges, electricity wires, so we can say they lack infrastructure. People there, mainly, they are not educated, and therefore we say we have low levels of education and skills. Also, the average income per capita, it is very low, and usually it is less than $1 a day. So because of that, this will definitely lead to poor living standards and the low average life expectancy. So the life expectancy, it means on average, if I tell you the life expectancy of Vietnam is 45 years, it means on average people die at the age of 45. This is considered really bad because it means people are dying at a very young age. It doesn't mean all people die at the age of 45. This is an average. Okay, so this tells us when people die at a young age, this tells us that the healthcare or the medical system there in that country is not good. Okay, now I have rapidly industrializing economies, or I can call them developing countries in a way. It means they are expanding or manufacturing their services sector, so they don't rely a lot on agricultural sector. Okay, they rely more on the services. Rapid development of modern infrastructure, rising incomes and living standards, and improving healthcare, their diet, and the life expectancy. So here it means that they are becoming better. Now, before, guys, before, probably you've heard of the terms first world countries, first world, second, and third. Now, these terms, ranking countries, it is not allowed anymore. So the UN does not allow us to call these countries by being first, second, or third. This is why we call them either less developed countries, rapidly industrializing, or developed economies. Now, developed, definitely, it means it is the best. So I can call them, what are their features to become a developed economy? You have high level of human and economic development. You have a wide range of industries. You do not only rely on one industry, no. So you have diversification. Unlike here they said they have low diversification. Also, they have proper infrastructure. This means well-developed roads, power, and communication networks. Mainly the people, the laborers there, the human resource, they are all skilled and educated. Their income per capita is high, so high average incomes, and therefore their living standards will be higher. And long average life expectancy. So definitely the life expectancy would not be 45. It would be 80 and above. So it means they have a lot of elderly because their medical system or their healthcare is absolutely perfect. Now, why are some countries considered to be less developed than others? Guys, you can find this in your books on page 385 and 386. So first of all, we will be talking about differences in the industrial sector. So some countries, they depend more on, I'm talking about less developed countries, okay? So these less developed countries, they depend more on agriculture or on farming in order to provide themselves with jobs and incomes. The second reason would be the differences in education and healthcare. So we're talking about the quality and access to education and to healthcare. Now remember, both education and healthcare are considered to be a merit good provided by the government. So it benefits all of the society. Healthy, educated people are more employable, productive, and creative, right? So the quality and the level of provision and the accessibility of education and healthcare in most developed countries is therefore generally good. Whereas in the less developed countries, they do not have access to education and to the proper healthcare. Okay? Differences in factor productivity. So if I want to be talking about the least developed economies, okay, I would say most industries are labor intensive and labor productivity would be low. So here, remember, when I'm talking about factor productivity, I'm talking about the factor of production, either land or capital. Labor or capital. If you rely on labor, it means you do not know how to use technology, or you might not have enough money to use technology and call yourself capital intensive. Let's forget that this type of product, it relies more on labor or on capital. In general, if the country relies more on labor rather than on machines, this tells us we're talking about least developed economies. So if I want to be talking about developing economies, you would see that labor skills and productivity will be increasing, and the use of capital to help increase the levels of productivity would also be increasing. On the other hand, if I want to be talking about developed economies when it comes to factor productivity, I would say that in developed economies, they would be relying on capital. So we call them capital intensive. Okay? The fifth reason is regarding population growth. So the differences in population growth. I would like you to stop for a second and you think, if you want to compare a least developed economy with a developed economy, who do you think the population in which country will be higher, in the least or in the developed economy? Okay, I will tell you the answer. It will definitely be in the least developed economies. Why? Because birth rates are higher and they exceed the death rates. Okay, remember this, we took it already last year in grade 9, and we said the reasons due to that factor, the population growth, with the uneducated, usually it's because to them their mentality would be the more the kids, the more the money. So they don't care really about the standards of living, and also they cannot afford to buy contraceptives. Whereas if I want to be talking about developed economies when it comes to population growth, you would see that both the mom and the dad would be working, so they don't have time to think about raising a big family. Their priority would be to get a certain prestige at their job. They have high living standards, so to them, the more the kids, it means the less the luxuries they would have. And also, in developed economies, they could afford contraceptives. That's why the population growth in developed economies, it would be slow or even negative because the birth rates are low. Now, the sixth reason would be differences in income. Usually, in developed economies, incomes and living standards are generally high for many people. Therefore, the consumer spending on services, it would be high. Whereas, if I want to be talking about least developed economies, incomes and living standards for many people would be low, and access to many basic goods and services would be limited. Okay, now remember, mainly what I'm doing here, I'm comparing between the developed economies and the least developed economies. Let's keep in mind that developing economies would be somewhere in between. Okay, the seventh factor would be famines, wars, and corruption. Usually, these would be found in these developed countries and not in the developed. The final reason would be international trade is dominated by developed nations who are able to control the world prices for natural resources such as oil, and they export from less developed economies. So mainly the poorer countries or the least developed countries, they are the countries that are rich in resources, but unfortunately these natural resources such as oil will be dominated by the developed economies, and they would be the ones that will set the price for it and even the supply. Okay, now this is the vicious cycle of low economic development or of poverty. So how countries can become trapped in low economic development? First of all, they have low income. Okay, when you have low income, it means you cannot spend or purchase enough goods and services, so you're limited buying power. Because of that, you don't have enough money to spend. You have poor incentives or motives to let you invest. Therefore, when you're not doing any investment, it means you lack capital, you lack machines. When we are not capital intensive, this would lead to low productivity. And low productivity, it means you are producing less, which means you're talking about low output. And low output, it means you will be receiving low income and so on. This is why we call it a cycle, because it keeps on moving. Okay, so guys, also this you can find it in your books on page 385. Okay, so also because it's a chain of thought, this could be a good analysis question. Now, there are some misconceptions that you might be facing in this lesson, and it is about remember that economic development is wider than economic growth. Finally, now since we are done with Unit 5.1, I would like you to fill in after the lesson. So everything, remember, should be clear. If it's not clear, then you need to ask me.